Good morning, everybody, and welcome to a Raffles Crew podcast with the wonderful Marcus Hand. Marcus is editor of Seatrade Maritime Gazette. Is that the correct name?
Maritime News.
I'm so sorry. Seatrade and Maritime News, and I should know that because we've known each other for quite a while. In fact, although my credentials to be associated with anything maritime are rather slim, other than a bit of sailing in my youth, we did in fact meet at a conference where I was giving a paper, believe it or not, on rig maintenance in Southeast Asia. Do you remember that?
Yes, and we were like talking to a bunch of Chinese engineers who probably had no idea what we were on about.
Well, they said they liked it. The feedback was good. So it's really good to meet you, Marcus, because I guess there are a few things that occur. One is we are in a state of considerable disarray in terms of the global economy with the Chinese tariffs, with an administration in the US that is busy trying to rewrite the rules of global trade. I don't think that's an unfair description. The idea is to improve the balance of trade for the US, but in the process, it's causing a significant disruption to business flows. I guess that's having a significant effect on the reliability of shipping and the rates that people have to pay to move stuff about.
Yeah, I think it's more into the reliability part probably than it is the rates part because shipping itself is, well, certainly if you look at the container part, it's facing an overcapacity. So that long term is sort of slowly pushing down rates anyway. But if you look at in terms of what's happening, say, with Chinese exports to the US, you're seeing huge fluctuations depending on what people think the tariffs are going to be at any given time. And those have varied between sort of 30%, 130 something. I think there's now a threat that they're going to go back to 130 something. So what you're seeing with that is you're seeing huge spikes in volumes like 1 month and then they'll fall off dramatically the next month and back again.
Yes, I mean, this administration sort of negotiates in plain sight. I mean, traditionally, lots of bureaucrats go into sequestration and work these things out and then come out with a deal which is then inked. But these days it seems to be done by megaphone, which spooks everybody.
No, it's a sort of complete opposite. It does have yeah, it just creates an awful lot of sort of problems. I mean, particularly if you look at the US side and you're an importer in the US, if you're going to have to pay 134% duty or whatever it is, you're obviously just going to go, no, we're not going to import anything because it would just make no logical sense. So the it, the huge gulf, the huge variation you're seeing just creates total chaos on that side. It's also hit exports from the US. Now, the US doesn't export that much. Just to give you an idea, the port of Los Angeles, which is one of the biggest US ports, for every four containers it imports, it exports one that's actually loaded. So there's a huge imbalance there, and that's going primarily across Trans-Pacific, so sort of China, Vietnam, etc. The other thing that's happening though is that China stopped buying soybeans from the US in retaliation, which is really hurting the agricultural exports from the US. That's rerouted trades there. That's actually buoyed the bulk trade somewhat because the trades are now longer as a net result of that as China finds alternative buyers. So there's all
Mostly in
sorts
South
of
America.
yeah. So there's all sorts of little impacts like that as well.
Okay, all right. So let's see. I know you get asked this a lot, and it's probably quite frustrating. Are shipping rates and shipping activity a leading indicator of economic health, or a lagging indicator, or indeed any kind of indicator at all? And if they are, what can you tell us?
I think in the past I would probably said actually yes, they are a leading indicator. I think increasingly what we've actually seen is the rates are responding to an environment they're in because things are shifting so quickly. So, for example, when you had the war in Ukraine broke out and the sanctions and all the things that came from that, that massively pushed up tanker rates. And that's sort of remained. But that was in response to the sanctions. It's not the other way around. So you can't really say. one or the other. But then against that, I suppose when you actually look at the economic figures, they would also lag because that's in terms of what you're seeing with the oil exports from Russia and the sanctions on those. So it probably is still an indicator in that sense, but it's just that the things are moving so quickly now. When it comes to looking at certain things, like, for example, the situation that's currently going on between the US and China, it's complicated somewhat by the fact that shipping has its own, container shipping has its own issues of the fact that it's ordered far too many ships. And these are all currently being delivered into the market. And that's slowly but surely pressing down rates. You are seeing spikes upwards as, the sudden sort of rushes to import stuff into the States. Again, it's hard to say it's really a leading indicator, but it probably just gives you an idea of what's going on at the moment, actually, rather than saying it's a leading indicator.
Okay, but I mean the actual cost and health of the shipping industry has a lot to do with whether or not there's an undersupply or oversupply of hulls. So that hasn't changed, I guess.
No,
Um,
it's probably one of the most fundamentally sort of, if you actually want to really give like a really good example of how demand and supply works or 101 economics, shipping is brilliant because it's so demand and supply sensitive, and the smallest changes can result in massive fluctuations in rates.
how long does it take to plan, fund, and build a ship?
I mean, currently, if you're looking to, well, the yards are actually very full because people have ordered lots of ships. So currently, if you're looking to order a ship now, you'd probably get it. There, if you're talking a large one, a large tanker or a large container ship, you'd probably get it in probably 2028, 20, maybe 27 if you're lucky. Very lucky.
All
Uh,
right, so I've been in 2 years' time, so I better get my order in then for my bulk carrier for when I move back to Europe.
Go
So
for it. I would possibly not choose bulk carriers, although there's not that many of those on order, so it might be a good call.
okay.
Um,
Can we talk about, I mean, because this, I recall the last time we talked about your industry in depth, there was a huge issue around sulfur emissions and around new legislation, and would ships use scrubbers, or would they change their engines, or how is that going to work? Now, the focus has moved off that somewhat, hasn't it?
yeah, well, that was the IMO 2020 debate, which is obviously at the start of 2020, which everybody thought was going to be some massive upheaval for the industry and passed almost totally unnoticed as we all went into COVID and panicked about that instead. Um, but basically, that was actually quite a non-event in all reality, unless you want to get into the real sort of nitty-gritty of, do you use high sulfur fuel oil and do you use scrubbers, which
But it would be fair to say that a lot of companies that had positioned their success on installing scrubbers on existing engines didn't do so well.
no, it's actually worked quite well.
Oh, has it? Okay.
If you take, for example, I mean, there was a theory that high sulfur fuel oil would gradually sort of die out. If you look at Singapore, which is the world's largest refueling port, bunkering port, by far, about one third of all the volumes sold here currently are high sulfur fuel oil, and therefore ships are fitted with scrubbers because the economics work.
Because there's a massive price differential between low sulfur and high sulfur fuel, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. So I got that completely wrong. Well, that's not unusual. So scrubbers have done well. That's interesting. So is that primarily through retrofitting, or is it new hulls with engines with scrubbers fitted standardly?
That's both. It
Okay.
just depends. It depends on how you can work the economics. You wouldn't do it on a really old ship. You generally do it on large ships, which is part of the reason those volumes are quite so high. But what you've seen now is we kind of, yeah, as you said, we've kind of moved on from that now in terms of, that's kind
So
of
now we've
off.
moved on from sulfur emissions to carbon emissions. And in fact, you were just moderating a conference on that very topic, were you not?
I was not moderating one, I must say. I was
Oh, we can
virtually.
say that you were, Marcus. Goodness gracious.
No, I don't think the IMO, which is UN body, would be too happy with that. No, I was a virtual attendee.
Okay.
There's been a very big meeting of the Marine Environment Protection Committee, which it's quite funny we're seeing all this. This is getting mainstream media interest these days. I mean, it was on this. This was on the BBC at the end of last week. Traditionally this stuff is the most boring stuff ever. No one beyond people like myself would be interested in it, but now it's got mainstream interest. And basically what it was is the as the governing body for shipping, the IMO is trying to agree what a carbon tax for shipping for or levy,
And
which would
shipping is an enormous emitter of carbon because it's a massive consumer of hydrocarbons, right? Um,
it's supposedly it what is said it 3% of all carbon emissions come from shipping.
which is
So,
more even than airlines, I guess.
no, I think airlines produce quite a lot actually, but it's I think it's equivalent to Germany basically. If you want a sort of comparison, if shipping was a nation state, it emits the same amount of carbon as Germany. So there's an attempt to produce this fund through the levy. The fund would then encourage the use and development of zero carbon fuels like green methanol, green ammonia, etc., rather than using traditional fuels, which are essentially bottom of the barrel
Yeah,
refinery waste.
yeah. But cheap because of that. They're the right at the bottom of the distillate, aren't they?
Exactly, and that's the thing. These new fuels are somewhere between 8 times as expensive. So the economics of going out and ordering a vessel that's going to cost you more because it's a new type of engine, and then is going to be fueled by a fuel that's 4 times as expensive.
But the outcome is that actually no decision has been made on that carbon tax.
Yes, so the outcome of this was that it was supposed to be decided last week, yes or no. It's been postponed for a year. Essentially, what happened was the US Trump administration, which has vigorously objected to this concept, has been lobbying nations not so quietly, I think, especially some of the smaller ones, and threatening all sorts of things, more tariffs, additional port fees, and all sorts of different things if they voted to support this levy. And I think the IMO was kind of faced, and the member states were faced with a position where if they had actually gone to a vote last week, I think there's a feeling they would have lost. It wouldn't have gone through.
So they didn't do it.
So they deferred it for a year. What that really does, I don't know, because I mean, unless the Trump administration suddenly expires in the next, 360 odd days, we're just going to be in exactly the same situation in a year's time. But
So that would, by how much would that increase the effective cost of fuel?
uh, I don't know on a per ton basis, to be honest with you.
Are we talking 3%, 5%, 20%?
I genuinely haven't actually looked at the
Okay.
exact numbers, and also I don't think the numbers are fully. It this is one of the complexities of this so-called net zero framework. Is you were countries were being asked to vote on something that is a framework, but the details are not yet fully decided.
Oh, bureaucrats love that
Yes.
because then they can do what they want, right? In committee. Oh dear. All right. Well, it doesn't sound, to be honest, your industry doesn't sound any more sorted out than it was 10 years ago when I last dipped my feet in. So it's resisting regulation quite well. The sulfur issue was resolved by using scrubbers. And there is tremendous uncertainty in shipping, but the price of the ships has got more to do with the cost of moving stuff around than the uncertainty in trading. Is that?
Well, I mean, yeah. The okay. So the price of freight is based on two things. It's based on supply and demand, and so if you get things like sanctions, tariffs, so forth, they obviously affect the demand side, and they can have dramatic changes in the rates. I mean, when I say dramatic, I think sort of give an idea. If you look at something like large tankers, you will see large tanker rates fluctuate from, say, $30,000 a day to something like $200,000 a day in the space of a month if you get some major event in the market.
Yeah.
And you imagine trying to manage that from the other
Well,
side.
trying to intermediate that if you're a freight forwarder no, I mean speaking as a business advisor, we've seen supply chains alter very significantly because of the amount that the price accorded to risk, particularly supply chain risk, has gone up very significantly. So sourcing stuff nearer home, if it's critical stuff, has become a real imperative, I think, for many companies. Um,
Well, I think the thing for I think if you're looking at the consumer side of shipping and container shipping and all of that and the supply chain and then air freight, which kind of feeds into the top end of that, Yes, you are looking at people and multi-sourcing strategies as well, not having all your eggs in the China basket and having some sort of nearshoring, whatever type of strategy. You've certainly seen that happening in the Med and sort of people relocating stuff to sort of Spain and Turkey and places like that.
Okay, all right, good. Marcus, that's very interesting. I mean, is there anything else you can, well, the Raffles crew has about 400 members across a range of industries, really. I mean, I think there are quite a few of them who are involved in manufacturing and or importing one way or another, so they're obviously very interested in knowing where the costs are likely to go up or down. I suspect you're going to say that it's hard to say.
Well, also it's hard to say. It depends exactly what sector you're in and what years you're
Yeah.
moving. If you're looking broadly at the consumer-led sort of container sector, I would say, broadly speaking, that will go down. And that is simply going to go down on a longer term trend because there are going to be too many ships.
Okay. Well,
And
that's good news.
yeah,
Costs are
well,
going to go down because there are too many ships. I'm going to quote you on
I think I say broadly. And I will add to that, if the ceasefire holds in Gaza and the Houthi then, for a prolonged period, stop firing at ships in the Red Sea.
They don't seem inclined to stop, do they, any more than
No, but if
any
they do, that would can significantly worsen the oversupply of ships because it would shorten the route to Europe because they go back via the Red Sea and the Suez Canal, which because the current route adds about 10 days to 2 weeks to a voyage each way.
which is hugely costly. Takes longer, costs more. That's amazing. Marcus, I really enjoyed our conversations. I wish we'd called up before. Um, so thank you very much, Marcus Hand. And for our audience at Raffles Crew, remember we have a wonderful event on the 4th of November. It's called Leaders in Tech. Who knows? Maybe we can persuade Marcus to come there and share some of his shipping insights. But in the meantime, those of you who are founders or funders or just fancy a bit of a knees up, come to the center of the universe on the 4th of November with the Raffles Crew. Thank you.
Thanks, Simon.